Long Beach, California, summer of 1968. The backstage area of the International Karate Championship pulsed with the raw energy of warriors coming down from battle. The concrete walls sweated with humidity, absorbing the mingled scents of liniment, perspiration, and the metallic temps of adrenaline that hung in the air like an invisible fog. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the faces of over 40 elite martial artists who had gathered in this cramped space, champions, contenders, and legends in the making, all drawn together by the magnetic pull of combat excellence. At the center of this gathering stood Chuck Norris, the newly crowned world middleweight karate champion for the 6th consecutive year. At 6 feet tall and 175 pounds of battle-hardened muscle, Chuck was the undisputed king of American karate. His trophy, a gleaming golden statue that caught the fluorescent light like a beacon, rested in his grip as admirers surrounded him with congratulations and praise. His GI was still damp with the sweat of victory, his knuckles still red from the impacts that had demolished his latest opponent in under 2 minutes. They called him the Texas Tornado for a reason. His spinning back kick had become legendary in tournament circles, a technique so devastatingly fast and powerful that opponents often didn't realize they'd been hit until they were already on the ground. In 6 years of competition, no one had found an answer to Chuck Norris. No one had even come close. His students flanked him like an honor guard, their eyes bright with reflected glory. To train under Chuck Norris was to train under the best. To be in his inner circle was to be part of martial arts royalty, and tonight their king had once again proven his dominance over every challenger. Foolish enough to step into the ring with him, but even in his moment of triumph, Chuck's attention kept drifting to a smaller gathering in the corner of the room. Bruce Lee stood among a cluster of curious martial artists, demonstrating techniques that defied conventional understanding. At 5 feet 7 inches and 140 pounds, he was physically unremarkable compared to the muscular champions filling the backstage area. He held no trophy. He had competed in no tournament. By every measurable standard of the competitive karate world, he was a nobody, just another martial arts instructor with unorthodox ideas. Yet the whispers that reached Chuck's ears told a different story. If you want to discover what happened when the undefeated karate champion challenged the man who had become the greatest martial arts legend of all time, and learn the lesson that transformed both of their lives, stay until the end of this story. You won't regret it. Did you see him move? One black belt muttered to another, just loud enough for Chuck to hear. It's not natural. Nobody should be that fast, faster than Norris. His companion asked skeptically. Different than Norris. Different than anyone. Chuck's jaw tightened. He had spent 6 years building his reputation through blood, sweat, and countless hours of training. He had faced the most dangerous fighters in America and defeated them all. And now these people were whispering about some instructor from Oakland who had never even competed, who had never proven himself in the crucible of tournament combat. One of Chuck's senior students, a broad-shouldered man named Tommy, leaned in close. You hear what they're saying, Sensei? They're comparing him to you. Some are even saying he might be faster. Chuck's eyes narrowed as he watched Bruce demonstrate a technique that made 3 separate black belts attempt to touch him and fail. Faster than me. That's the rumor. Ed Parker's been telling everyone this. Bruce Lee is something special. Says he's never seen anything like him. The competitive fire that had driven Chuck to 6 world championships flared hot in his chest. Ed Parker was a legend. His opinion carried weight. But speed was Chuck's domain. His kicks were clocked at speeds that seemed physically impossible. No one was faster than Chuck Norris. No one. Hold this, Chuck said, pressing his trophy into Tommy's hands. Sensei, what are you? But Chuck was already moving, cutting through the crowd with the purposeful stride of a predator. The sea of martial artists parted before him. This was not a man seeking conversation. This was a man seeking truth. Bruce Lee sensed his approach before seeing him. He turned smoothly, that enigmatic half-smile playing at his lips, as if he had been expecting this moment all along. Up close, the contrast between them was stark. Chuck towered over Bruce, outweighed him by 35 pounds, and carried the visible marks of competitive success. Bruce looked almost delicate by comparison, but his eyes held something that gave Chuck pause. There was no fear there, no deference, only a calm, evaluating intelligence. "Chuck Norris," Bruce said, inclining his head respectfully. "Congratulations on your victory. 6 championships is an impressive achievement." "Thank you." Chuck's voice was clipped, controlled. "I've been hearing interesting things about you, Mr. Lee. They say you're fast. Speed is relative, Mr. Norris. They say you might be faster than me." The crowd around them had grown silent. Word spread through the backstage area like wildfire. Chuck Norris was confronting Bruce Lee. Within seconds, nearly everyone present had formed a loose circle around the two men. Sensing that something significant was about to happen, Bruce's smile didn't waver. "I've never competed in tournaments. I have no titles to compare with yours. Such comparisons seem meaningless. Then let's make them meaningful." Chuck shifted his weight, his body unconsciously assuming a fighting stance. "You've got a lot of people impressed with your demonstrations, your tricks, but demonstrations aren't combat. Tournaments are. I've proven myself against the best fighters in America. You've proven nothing." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Several of Bruce's students bristled at the disrespect, but Bruce himself remained completely calm. "What would you propose, Mr. Norris?" "Simple?" Chuck gestured to the open space between them. "You and me. Right here, right now. Let's find out if you're really as fast as they say, or if it's all just showmanship." The challenge hung in the air like a thunderclap. 40 elite martial artists held their breath, unable to believe what they were witnessing. The world karate champion was publicly challenging an unknown instructor to prove himself. Bruce was silent for a moment, his dark eyes studying Chuck with an intensity that was almost uncomfortable. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly to every ear in the room. "Mr. Norris, I have great respect for your achievements. Your kicking technique is exceptional. Your dedication is evident. But tournament combat and real combat are different animals." He paused. "Are you certain this is what you want?" "I'm certain." Chuck's hands came up, assuming his fighting stance, the same stance that had devastated dozens of opponents. "Show me what you've got, Mr. Lee. Let's see if you can back up all these whispers." Bruce nodded slowly, but didn't assume any recognizable stance. He simply stood, relaxed, hands at his sides, weight evenly distributed. To Chuck's trained eye, it looked like carelessness, like arrogance. Like a man who didn't understand what he was facing, Chuck attacked his spinning back kick, the technique that had ended countless fights. The weapon that had earned him the nickname Texas Tornado launched with explosive speed. His body rotated, his heel cutting through the air toward Bruce's midsection with enough force to crack ribs. The kick hit nothing. Chuck's momentum carried him through the rotation. And when he regained his orientation, Bruce was simply standing 2 feet to the left of where he had been. He hadn't blocked. He hadn't jumped. He had simply relocated. No hesitation. Chuck launched a combination front kick, back fist, reverse punch, 3 techniques delivered at full tournament speed. Each one was technically perfect, honed through thousands of hours of practice. Each one could have ended a fight against any normal opponent. Bruce flowed around them like water around stones. He didn't retreat, didn't even seem to move with any urgency. He was simply never where Chuck's attacks arrived. Frustration ignited into fury. Chuck unleashed everything he had, spinning kicks, jumping kicks, hand combinations that had overwhelmed every opponent he'd ever faced. For 3 seconds, he threw every weapon in his considerable arsenal at Bruce Lee. 3 seconds. 0 contact. Chuck stopped, breathing hard, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. He was the fastest kicker in competitive karate. He had spent years perfecting techniques that no one could counter. And this man, this small, unassuming instructor, had made him look like a beginner. "How?" Chuck started to ask. He never finished the question. Bruce moved. There was no other word for it. One instant he was standing 3 feet away. The next instant Chuck was on his back, staring up at the fluorescent lights, with Bruce's foot hovering 1 inch above his throat. The transition had been so fast that Chuck's brain hadn't even registered the take. One moment he was standing. The next moment he was defeated. The total elapsed time from Bruce's movement to Chuck's position on the ground. Less than 3 seconds, absolute silence filled the backstage area. 40 martial artists stood frozen, their minds unable to reconcile what their eyes had just witnessed. Chuck Norris, the undefeated world champion, the Texas Tornado, the fastest kicker in America, had been put on the ground. By a man half his reputation without a single blow being thrown, Bruce withdrew his foot and extended his hand. In tournament combat, there are points and judges and rules. In real combat, there are no referees. Only results. Chuck lay still for a long moment, staring at the offered hand. His entire understanding of martial arts, of his own abilities, of what was possible, had been demolished in less than 3 seconds. He had trained his entire adult life. He had sacrificed everything for his art. He had believed he was the best. He had been wrong. Slowly, Chuck reached up and grasped Bruce's hand, allowing himself to be pulled to his feet. His legs felt uncertain beneath him, not from physical damage, but from the psychological impact of what had just occurred. "I don't understand," Chuck said quietly, his voice stripped of its earlier confidence. "I've trained every day for 10 years. I've defeated everyone I've faced. How did you—" Bruce's expression held no mockery, no triumph, only the patient understanding of a teacher who recognized a genuine student. "You trained to win tournaments, Mr. Norris. You trained within rules, within boundaries, within a system designed for sport. Your techniques are excellent, perhaps the best I've seen in the tournament world. But you've never trained for what happens when there are no rules, no points, no time limits." Bruce gestured to the space where their exchange had occurred. "Your spinning kick is devastating. Against a tournament opponent, it's nearly unstoppable. But it takes 1.2 seconds to execute. In real combat, 1.2 seconds is a lifetime. I saw it coming before you decided to throw it." Chuck absorbed this in silence. Every word rang true. He had never thought about his techniques in those terms, as movements with telegraphed beginnings and predictable trajectories. In the tournament world, being fast enough was sufficient. But Bruce Lee operated on a different level entirely. "What you did at the end," Chuck said slowly, "when you put me down, I didn't see any of it." "How is that possible?" Bruce smiled. "You were looking for techniques, stances, kicks, punches, the vocabulary of your training. But I don't fight with vocabulary. I fight with expression. No forms, no telegraphing, no patterns for your mind to recognize. Your eyes saw movement, but your brain couldn't categorize it. So you froze, and 3 seconds later, I was on the floor." 3 seconds is a very long time in real combat. Most encounters are decided in less than 1. Chuck was quiet for a long moment. Around them, the crowd of martial artists began murmuring among themselves, processing what they had witnessed, debating its implications. But Chuck heard none of it. His mind was entirely focused on the small man standing before him, the man who had just shattered 6 years of certainty. When Chuck spoke again, his voice held something it hadn't contained in years: humility. "I've spent a decade believing I knew what martial arts was. 10 years of training, competing, winning, and in 3 seconds, you showed me I've barely scratched the surface." He straightened, meeting Bruce's eyes directly. "I want to learn. Whatever you're teaching, however you move like that, I want to understand it. Will you teach me?" Bruce studied him for a long moment. "Learning requires emptying your cup, Mr. Norris. You would have to set aside your championships, your reputation, your certainty that you already know the way. You would have to become a beginner again." "I'm ready. Are you?" "Truly, your ego took a significant blow tonight." Many men would walk away, convince themselves that what happened was a fluke, protect their self-image. The easy path is denial. Chuck shook his head slowly. "The easy path is what got me here, thinking I had nothing left to learn. That arrogance almost kept me from seeing the truth." He extended his hand. "I'm not asking to become your student forever. I'm asking for the chance to understand what I just experienced. After that, if you decide I'm not worth teaching, I'll accept it." Bruce clasped his hand firmly. Anyone with the courage to admit they were wrong has already taken the first step on the true path. "It would be my honor to train with you, Mr. Norris." The handshake marked the beginning of one of the most legendary friendships in martial arts history. In the months that followed, Chuck Norris became a regular training partner for Bruce Lee. They exchanged techniques, philosophies, and approaches. Chuck learned about intercepting fist concepts and economy of motion. Bruce gained insights into competitive strategy and the physical conditioning methods that had made Chuck a champion. Their friendship would eventually lead them to collaborate on screen, in Way of the Dragon. Chuck would play the final antagonist in one of the most celebrated martial arts fight scenes ever filmed. The respect between them was genuine. Bruce had specifically requested Chuck for the role, telling producers that he wanted an opponent the audience would believe could actually threaten him. Years later, after Bruce Lee's tragic passing in 1973, Chuck Norris would speak about their relationship with reverence that never faded. "People always ask me about that first meeting," Chuck would tell interviewers, his voice carrying the weight of personal experience. "They expect me to be embarrassed that I challenged him and ended up on the floor. But that moment was the greatest gift anyone ever gave me. Bruce didn't humiliate me, he liberated me. He showed me that everything I thought I knew was just the beginning. He opened a door I didn't even know existed." When asked who the greatest martial artist he ever met was, Chuck's answer never varied: Bruce Lee, without question, without hesitation, the fastest, most skilled martial artist I've ever seen or ever will see. And more importantly, he was a man generous enough to share his knowledge with someone who had challenged him publicly. That takes a special kind of person. The encounter between Chuck Norris and Bruce Lee became a foundational story in martial arts history, not as a tale of defeat, but as a testament to the transformative power of humility. It demonstrated that true mastery is not about defending one's reputation, but about continuous growth. That the greatest champions are those willing to become students again, and that sometimes the most important victory is the one you lose. Bruce Lee often said, "Empty your cup so that it may be filled." On that summer evening in Long Beach, Chuck Norris emptied his cup and discovered that there were oceans of knowledge he had never imagined. If this story inspired you to set aside your ego and remain open to learning, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Share this story with someone who needs to hear that admitting you were wrong is the beginning of becoming right. Leave a comment telling us about a time when losing taught you more than winning ever could. We'll see you in the next video with more incredible stories from the world of martial arts.